Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Other Job Podcast, a place where we explore all those tasks that are required for building high-performance teams, but we never seem to have enough time to do or do well. We started this podcast to share our learnings from being there and doing that, for those who want to go there and do that, and to hear from voices in the industry to share their expertise. We've both grown tired of the constant posting on LinkedIn that doesn't allow for deeper exploration of the nuances and techniques in go-to-market. This will give us more room to explore those topics, talk about the caveats, and hopefully provide insights to both experienced and new go-to-market professionals alike. To that end, we've invited today Noah Jenkins. He had a really interesting path in sales, from wealth management to sales, and now leading sales teams. Noah, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Jeff. Thanks, Chris. Really excited to be here and take part in what I feel is an underserved area, the frontline leader. So I've been really loving the podcast, and a lot of things have resonated. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, appreciate you joining us, especially in the middle of the home remodeling project going on in the background.
Can you hear that?
A little bit, but you know what? It's okay. It just adds to kind of like, your whole like industrial vibe, if you will. So we're just gonna lean into that. By the way, it's great to see you. It's been a while. For those of you who don't know, Noah and I worked together at a previous employer. And so this is a really good conversation because on the previous episode, or on a previous episode, I should say, Jeff and I explored kind of this concept around an ICP. And we weren't talking about an ideal customer profile. We were talking about the ideal candidate profile for your organization. And when Noah and I worked together, I think, Noah, if I remember correctly, we had more than one really energetic conversation around this, although I don't think either of us were smart enough to have called it an ICP. We were just kind of debating what should a candidate profile look like. And you're really passionate about this. You want to just start by telling the audience like how you think about what a candidate profile looks like?
Yeah, so I think it's extremely important to really focus on what a successful account executive in your company looks like. What traits do you look for? And you have to be very, very diligent about that and work with the rest of your peers to understand, why are certain reps successful? Is that something that you can replicate? And then write that down, what you're looking for, so that you know the traits and the qualities that you're looking for when you're going out to find your candidates, and then when you're starting to interview them, and focus your interviews and the way that you're attracting candidates by that profile.
So Noah, it was really interesting. I had an old boss of mine once tell me, when they were looking for stuff for candidates, that they would say, like, write down the things you're unwilling to train and that you expect them to bring in through the front door. And then everything else is negotiable. I wonder if that's kind of how you're thinking about that as well, is like, you've got your non-negotiables. Would you mind sharing maybe a couple of those as you bringing people into your organizations?
Yeah, that's a really great point, Jeff. And I think those traits depend on the role that you're hiring for, right? If you're looking for an SMB or an emerging candidate, there's obviously going to be things that you're going to have to coach on that you might not have to coach on for a corporate or an enterprise or a strategic seller. So you really need to understand the positions that you're hiring for and the trainings and coachings that are required for each of those positions. But for me personally, the things that are non-negotiable, first of all, being in the enterprise and strategic space, is the understanding of how to run a complex sales cycle. That's extremely important to me. You've got to have really high quality discovery, understand what it means to get to the pain point for a customer so that you can start driving value for them and using that throughout the process. That coupled with curiosity, which leads to great questions, great discovery, great preparation for being on those customer calls. And finally, for me, it's just that grit and that energy and effort that you can't coach, that they want to be successful and nothing will stop them from being successful. Those are the three traits that are non-negotiable for me.
So Noah, I can't help but notice as a sales leader, any sort of metric around past performance was not on your list. Talk to me a little bit about that. Like, is that because, I don't know, maybe in between the years, 2012 and 2021, maybe performance metrics skewed up into the right because of the economy, or like what's your thinking there? Like why are you not honed in on performance metrics like so many sales leaders are?
Yeah. How many resumes have you seen where someone says 50% attainment, 60% attainment? Nobody. So there's really no way to verify what's actually being put out there as far as their attainment numbers go. So what I look for when I'm interviewing and finding my candidates is, can they articulate why and how they've been successful? And is that repeatable? Because at the end of the day, obviously sales is an art, but at the same time, it is important the territories that you have, the time in the market, the companies. So it could just be right time, right place. And you can snuff out during those interviews, this person doesn't have anything to their secret sauce. They don't have a process that they're following. So to me, it's more important to be able to understand why they've been successful rather than them telling me some number that may or may not be true.
Interesting. So maybe pivoting the conversation a little bit, one of the things that Jeff and I have talked about behind the scenes, so to speak, is the importance of having the leader actually participate. No, I shouldn't even say participate, Jeff. We've thought about like having the leader lead the sourcing efforts. Noah, how do you approach sourcing candidates? Are you check in with a recruiter once a day guy, or what do you do on the sourcing front?
Yeah. So for me, sourcing all begins with me. Anything that the recruiting team can bring in is an added bonus. And that's just been my experience. And this is something that I think both new and old leaders really need to dedicate time to. And it's something that I dedicate a lot of time to, which is staying in touch with previous coworkers and friends that are in the business or people that you've met during a sales cycle, because you never know when you're going to be able to help them, when they're going to be able to help you. And that allows you to understand, hey, here's some candidates on the bench that I know I want to try and go get. Doesn't mean you're going to be able to go get them because they're probably happy and doing very, very well. But if you have that bench and bullpen of high quality candidates, you can go and you can try and influence them to come over to join you.
Yeah, I mean, I'll add to that. I first got made a people hirer and people manager when I was 24. At a startup. And when you got that promotion, one of the first stops was our CEO, and he shared out a one-pager that was like, these are your responsibilities as a hiring manager. And I remember really clearly, he was like, if you ever show up in my office and say recruiting is not delivering you enough candidates, I'm going to walk you out. It is your job to build your team. That is not an outsourced task. But okay, so then we've got that very black and white. It is your job to source candidates. So Noah, then what's the job of the recruiter? Like, do they have a sourcing role? Like, I have a lot of people that are probably watching this that are recruiters and are also my friends. And I mean nothing by that. But if the leader's job is to source, is there a role for the recruiter to play in filling the pipeline of candidates?
Yeah, I think that's, I've worked with some really great recruiters and I've worked with some average ones. And I think the great ones collaborate with you to understand, what do you look for? Like, what are the traits that I should be screening for, so that you can help, almost like the SDR-AE partnership, right? Like, you want to help coach them on what you need and what you're looking for. And so then you can say, hey, as far as outside companies, here's where I've seen great talent come in from. Maybe we can try and prospect into some candidates there. If you're the type of person that likes outside the industry, what industries are you willing to look outside into, and let them know, hey, I'll take a candidate from this that has X, Y, and Z, so that they can start doing some of that, almost filling the top of the funnel of candidates for you.
Yeah, it sounds.
Jeff, the other thing I'd add, just to jump in real quick, sorry, but sourcing is one important, don't get me wrong, very narrow sliver of the recruiting and hiring pipeline.
That's right.
Or process. So let's say Noah does all his own sourcing, or whoever does all their own sourcing of candidates. There's still a process that needs to be run to properly recruit a potential employee. And look, during the boom years, finding a person was one thing. Getting them interested was another. and giving them a white glove interview process and hiring process such that they actually wanted to be a part of your team and your company was a whole nother level. And you had to get to that white glove level to actually like hire a good candidate because there were so many options available to people. It'll be interesting to see now that, things are changing a bit, whether that holds true. I mean, I know for a fact in the industry, roles that if they had been posted a couple of years ago would have gotten maybe a dozen candidates applying are now getting hundreds, if not upwards of 1,000 candidates applying for a single AE role. The leadership roles are kind of even more exaggerated than that. So there is absolutely a role for recruiting in managing the overall process, in my opinion.
Well, and I actually think like recruiting and the hiring manager's job is to make the candidate feel wanted, right? There's nothing better as a candidate to feel wanted, because then when you get there, you will then also feel that they want to keep you around.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think that's incredibly important. Is like, I hope that as the competition for roles goes up, that the humanity of how people get treated in the process doesn't inversely go down. And
that's a great point, Jeff. And I think it's once you've gotten, whether it's someone that you've sourced yourself or you're working with someone, having that recruiter that keeps those communication lines open with the candidate is really important. I'm sure we've all been in those instances where it's touch and go from the recruiter and you're like, what's the next step? What's happening? Do they want me? Do they like me? I'm interested. I thought we were like taking the next step here. And that's really where the recruiter needs to come in and carry that momentum forward for you.
I know I'm working with a good recruiter when they're kind of pinging me on a regular basis saying, what's the status of your decision on, candidate A, B, C, D? I want to proactively get back to them with a status and a decision.
Yep.
That for me is a sign of like a fantastic recruiter.
Yeah, 100%. Like they are worried about, like I literally took it 3 jobs ago. I took a job because the interview team sent a handwritten note about why they wanted me to join the team. Like freaking class A move that I have now stolen and used as I'm recruiting and building my teams again. Like, don't underestimate that the candidate wants to feel wanted. That's literally how they sign up.
Yeah.
Right? The whole like doing a bunch of stupid human tricks to get your attention and then maybe you'll be graced with an offer. Absolute nonsense. And those are gigantic red flags. Do not work for those people.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. And I love the handwritten note thing. And it's something that I've been thinking about a lot is what's old is new again. And it's really cool to hear you say that. And like a handwritten note to a candidate, a prospect goes a long way.
Yeah. 100%.
No, I just figured out what I'm getting you for Christmas this year. I'm going to get you some really nice stationery to send out all those handwritten notes on.
Yeah. The only problem there, Chris, is I write in code. It's almost illegible. My wife has to write.
I've seen your handwriting. That was a joke, Noah. So I want to move on, moving us down the path a little bit, because Noah and I, when we work together, I have vivid memories of one set of conversations in particular. And this set of conversations was essentially, is it okay to go source and recruit from outside of our industry, of our very specific kind of segment of a business? And not just did Noah and I agree that it was okay to go do that, but what would the other stakeholders in the company think about that? Would we get support? Where do we need to help educate? What would we gain by going outside of the business versus what risks would we create, and where would we be able to lean in and coach? Noah, I know you've got really firm points of view on this.
Yeah. This is where you have to be comfortable as a leader to go to bat. And first of all, if you're bringing someone in from external, it probably goes back to that network that you had, or outside of your industry, it probably goes back to that network that you had. And one thing I didn't hit on in the network is that takes work and effort. It takes time for you to reach out, stay in touch at a personal level with these people, not just to hey, check in, like, is it still rough over there or what's going on? But they can actually be friends with people. It takes that effort to know that. But then once you're going outside the industry, you have to have a case built of what they've done in the past, why it transfers to what you're doing, and what they could bring to the team. And you need to have conviction and confidence that you're right.
There was a recent interview the CEO of Palo Alto Networks gave that talked about companies over-indexing on domain expertise, and that domain expertise is oftentimes a barrier to progress because the naiveness of possibility is gone from them.
Yeah.
And so I think that type of you can't have an entire team with no domain expertise. Let's be really clear, right? But like my first hire was a physics major, and this was into a data and analytics company. It was because I needed a certain set of mental reasoning and approach to problem solving when the background didn't line up. And so, no, you can't go take an out of industry for your entire team. But man, the accelerant for everyone else on the team to bring someone in with a different perspective can really be an unlock. And I think that can be pretty wild to witness as a leader.
Well, at the end of the day, like, is it easier to teach? I mean, look, this concept of like actually teaching people sales skills has been, you know, we got an episode coming on the topic of enablement, right? But you know, like sales training programs back in the day used to be long months or years long training programs at big, organized, well-run companies. And so there's a like a school of thought that's like, well, it's easier to teach product area, you know, XYZ, or it's easier to teach SaaS, like what does termination for convenience mean, or what's this pricing model? It's easier to teach that stuff than it is to teach actually all these sales skills. And I think a lot of us have seen that based on like the enablement curriculum that we see being used in the industry today. So
yeah,
that hits right on the domain expertise thing, Jeff.
Yeah, Chris, I totally agree with you, and you hit on a couple of really key points that I really agree with. When I'm looking outside the industry, I'm looking for a couple of very specific things. Folks that have hunted a lot in their past and have been responsible for sourcing their own opportunities is something that's kind of foreign to a lot of software sellers, especially over the past 10 years. They're so used to the BDR world or the SDR world where a lot of it is done for them, which is great. And like, that's going to continue, but you want to find those folks outside that have that skill set of going and prospecting how to really generate their own business, to add that extra fuel to the fire, because that's how you get those really elite sellers. And then, like you said, like the old school, like I came from finance and wealth management, and Chris, you're exactly right. We had a month-long training where afterwards you have a pass-fail test where you are role-playing with your boss and your boss's boss. And if you don't pass it, you're gone, you're out.
Yeah.
And those are like, I look for those companies, both in industry and outside industry, that have those training programs. And I put those on the list that I send to the recruiter to say, hey, focus on these companies. They've got world-class training and world-class enablement. Let's go cherry pick some of that.
Well, let's take your first point. The whole like sales rep that source their own opportunities and not in the BDR world. Listen, BDR is an invention of B2B tech SaaS sales, period. You get outside of that industry, that model doesn't exist. The sellers in that industry or in all of those other industries are sourcing their own opportunities. And so maybe to just add the final sort of fuel to the fire here is that going outside, like when's the last time you hired a seller that was blown away that there was someone dedicated to filling their pipeline that wasn't them? Does that ever happen? Like, you know what I mean? Like that is a given.
Jeff, that's just one slice of this, 100%. Right? That's just the pipeline build.
That's right.
I had dinner with a customer as going back a little bit in time, and I got to sit next to the top performing rep in the company, and I asked her point blank, "What do you attribute your success to?" And she said, "I was sourced and hired from outside of tech," and talked about not only building her own pipeline but installing the product that she sold and all the other things that she did. And she talked about, like, I just brought that mentality with me to B2B tech, and it's made me very, very successful. And I'm not going to go into the numbers, but like jaw-dropping numbers. So yeah.
And then the trick is, once you get them there, like, encourage them to continue that and not fall into the trap of, hey, this is the way it happens in tech, let the SDRs do the work for you. Like, capture that and like highlight it to the team so that you can start sharing some of those ideas. Because Jeff, I think you hit on it. When you bring some folks outside the industry, you get a totally different perspective, and it can really help the team grow.
Yep. Noah, so when you think about sourcing, what are some of the places that you look? You talked about your personal network. You talked about companies. How do you see sort of the ICP helping your recruiter find candidates for you as well?
Yeah. So the ICP helping the recruiter is really just to help them kind of coach them of where they should be looking. Another area and thing that I really focus on, and this comes more from what I look for and how I will coach and work with the recruiting team, is I'm always looking for the next rock star that's ready for that next step. Especially as you're in the up market, it's really hard to go to a company where there might be some top performing enterprise or strategic reps and get them to leave, because it takes years sometimes to become successful in those segments, because the cycles are so long, and they typically do not want to leave and start over. And that's totally fine. So you need to understand who might be what's the team below them at that company, and who are the rock stars there that can't get the next step at that company, but are ready for it. And the same thing internally, like who's the next mid-market rep that's ready for enterprise? Who's the next SDR that's ready for that next step up? So you have to be able to identify, again, it comes down to that ICP of what you're looking for and the traits that you have, but to find the people that are ready for that next step. Unless you have a surefire, this person is making a move laterally for a very specific reason, I tend to lean on the person that's getting to take that next step up.
And that was Noah's brand, by the way. Like, poach the best people from the other teams.
Yeah,
Just wouldn't let me. I tried.
Yeah, it's also interesting. It's also interesting that, like, when I was looking for SCs, for example, I'd rarely go after the SC that had been somewhere for 8 years, and I rarely go after the SC looking after 6 months. I have been that SC, by the way, so I understand the irony in that statement. But it's one of those where they have clearly established themselves as successful, but they're not dumb, fat, and happy. And so you catch someone at the 18 to 26 month, 28 month window. And so when I'm like going on, like, to get really tactical for folks, when I go on, I say, from these companies identified that are either a nice to have or a need to have technology and whatever. And then I look at tenure. I go 18 to, a year and a half to 2.5 years. And that is my sweet spot of the bell curve, because you've been there 4 or 5 years. Yeah, maybe your run's over, but if it's a successful company, you're probably maybe not as hungry anymore. Gross generalizations, I know I'll get lit up in the comments over. But that is kind of the window. Like, I look at career or tenures at companies as bell curve. We can argue about where the peak of that bell curve is over a time horizon. And if someone had been there 8-9 years, had hit a home run, the chance they're going to hit a home run on the next one is almost zero.
The chance that they need to is
okay. We got to top it. Here we go.
Okay, hang on. No, Jeff, what I want to know is, are you in today's economic reality and this move to, like, profitability focus, maybe on, hey, we can run these SaaS businesses way more efficiently, especially the mature, successful ones.
Yep.
Are you open to broadening your perspective on that? Because my theory is, now more so than ever in the last 10 to 20 years, those 7, 8, 9, 10-year veterans of some of the big tech companies are actually going to find themselves having to be hungry again, whether it's at the company they're at today or at a new company. Because there's articles every day about these big companies having to get more profitable, and not just having to, willingly and aggressively moving towards a more profitable stance. So there are some very experienced team members that, in my opinion, are going to be out there wanting to get hungry again.
Yeah, so I'm open to broadening my aperture on that question. I also would argue that person, 8, 9, 10-year veteran, is your network hire. Right? They're the one. They're like, hey, listen, so-and-so from my previous company, great seller, been there a long time, looking to make a change, realize the future for him isn't here or isn't here for her. Would you take the intro call? I'm taking that call every single day of the week.
Yep.
Yeah. The other benefit, I mean, just to be really clear, is if we look at, again, the economic, eras here, if you're looking for people that have performed prior to the golden years of the economy, again, it started arguably like in 2012, 2013. So if you're looking for go-to-market team members that have marketed, sold, successed, et cetera, in a tougher economic situation, you actually kind of have to go back.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I also think, like, if you are offering up, I think we've all three of us have worked at both need to have companies and nice to have companies. You can always pick a transition. I will take a senior person from a nice to have solution and bring them into a need to have company without hesitation, because at some level they will walk in and be like, oh my gosh, they actually have to buy something. And it's not, you are already over the hump. Should I change? Then they're just like, which vendor?
Yeah.
Right. Versus like spending 9 months convincing them that the way they've always done it is wrong and that they need to change and that there's upside to them to change. Like moving from a nice to have to a need to have company, shoot, man, then it's just vendor work. I know, again, people are going to get upset with me in the comments, because it's not to say that an FP&A or a general ledger's solution is an easy sale. I'm not saying that, but you go take a nice to have rep and put them in a need to have company and watch magic happen. It's wild.
Yep.
Yeah,
I totally agree, Jeff. And a lot of those folks tend to have a process, right? Which, going back to what I look for, they can very articulately, is that a word? Articulate?
Sure. With the irony of us questioning, that's really fun.
It is on the other show podcast.
That's right.
Works for me. And having them help you understand and articulate why they've been successful. That's how you can vet that out.
Yeah, cool. So Noah, I think this has been an incredibly rich conversation. Hopefully folks at different stages of their maybe they don't have a head count now, but they will soon. And, I'm hearing from you, they ought to get started and making sure that network's ready when you got the job open. Is there one or two things that you'd want to leave the audience with to make sure that they hear from you? Like one of our goals, Chris and I's goals, is to bring folks who have different perspectives or smarter than us, to share with our audience how they go about this. So any sort of final parting words that you'd have for our audience around sourcing and how you build your teams? Yeah.
Don't wait until you're ready to hire to start the process. If you're waiting that long, it's going to take you forever to get the candidates that you want. The motto that I have is hire slow, but that's because it starts well before you've got the opening. You want to know the candidates that are on the bench that you want to target way ahead of time. So that way you're not waiting. You're not relying on the recruiting team. You can do these things yourself.
Let me help you with some branding there now, like some, marketing words. Like, I think what you really mean is source early or source fast, but hire slow, right? Like,
yeah,
you want the candidates there, you want to know who you want to hire way before you're ready to pull the trigger and hire people. And I think that's really valuable. And a lot of our listeners' questions that I can anticipate getting is, why is this such an important topic now when there's so many candidates potentially available? And, I actually think that makes it even more important, right? To get people working through the process as early as possible. It's just as challenging hiring in a kind of a world where there's almost quote unquote too many candidates for the job openings. That's as hard as hiring when there are not enough candidates.
We talked about this. 1,000 applicants and 0 applicants are exactly the same thing.
Yep. Bingo.
It's just period. Like if you get 1,000 applicants, you may as well have gotten 0.
Yeah.
You've got to own the process as the leader. You've got to have the bench. And maybe to add to your last statement there, Noah, for candidates, have that network in place before you need a job, because you've got the hiring manager and the leader that you want to go work for who's already got people in mind before their headcounts open. So that's actually a two-way street, and I think advice that lands for anyone listening.
Yeah. And again, this is why I say it takes work to keep that personal network up. And you also have to be willing, when it comes time for those people that reach out to you, help them. You know, if you don't have an opening on your team, like, that's why it's also good to have a network of peers that are your peers, right? And you can help them, and you lean on that network. They can lean on the network. It takes time. That sometimes might not result in you getting the hire, but it might help you do the right thing for the person that you're like a friend with.
Awesome. Noah, thanks for joining.
Thank you, Noah.
Great to see you. Good luck with the home improvement project.
Absolutely. It's I muted it for a little bit, so hopefully it went away.
Yeah, you're good. Thanks, Noah, and we'll see you next time.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Jeff.